right? If it is the flood condition happen, the severe flood condition happen, what will the result of there? Any idea? Any idea? Do you know the wetland will absorb more and more waters? Anybody near to the wetlands? Don't keep silence, huh? You people are there? Nobody near to the wetlands area? No any experience? So in some film, Tamil films, I don't know the name. So that one girl will trapped in that wetland area, so we can't get them out. So some kind of area is in Sri Lanka. Nobody knows. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Then why you are not response to me? No any experience with wetlands? Okay.
No.
Okay. So those area is always in a condition of wet or moist. It's like a inundated. That means it's always in a condition of, so think if you mix water, that over water to the excess water to some clay soil, clay soil, no?
Yes, ma'am.
So yeah. So if you mix the clay soil with more water, what will happen? What conditions of soil you will get? It's like the watery paste like things, no? Isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes.
Imagine that this wetland area always be like that, right? So whenever you adding the water to that, it will absorb and it will tend to be that in that form, right? So the thing is, when the more water is coming to the wetland, the water will absorb by the wetlands. That means the flood retention area. So if it is in a small area, if you are having clay in, so 1 kilo of clay in your pot and you are adding water, that will absorb more and more water. Like that, if imagine that as an area, hectares, that 100,000 hectares of area, right? If that area is like that, what will happen? Whenever the flood is happen in another area, normally water will move from highest altitude to lowest altitude, right? So in that way, water will move and it will reach this wetland area. That means the water will absorb by these wetland areas. Understood? Because of that, we are calling that flood retention area, right? And not only it's play the role as flood retention area, but also as filters for sediment, nutrients, and pollutants, and pollutant releasing to the environment. That means, so with the flood, with the water moving, that these things, sediments, nutrients, pollutants, will settle to that particular area. So these things also filtered by the wetland ecosystem, right? So the thing is, more, whenever we have the wetlands, so we have these benefits in the ecosystem. Right. So, for example, some other factories are creating some of the chemicals or some of the productions which is releasing the polluted chemicals or polluted outcomes. So we can use these sorry, we can use these wetlands to dispose those pollutants, right? So this is the main things, when we talk about the play as a flood retention area of wetlands, right? Further, we can say a wetland provides refuge for many species of vertebrates, invertebrates, and is a source of raw material for various industries, right? So some other we can say the examples of animals and birds or some other flora fauna occupied in the wetlands. So these are some two examples of wetland or marshlands, right? Muthurajavala marshland and Yala wetland. So this is the example for wetlands in Sri Lanka. I have put two examples here, right? So now we will move into marine ecosystem. Right, so marine ecosystem, as we discussed, it's cover about 3/4 of the Earth's surface and include ocean, coral reefs, and estuaries. Right, so here we can say in the marine ecosystem, how the oxygen supply is happen. Hmm? Right. If it is terrestrial ecosystem, plants are there. It's absorbing the carbon dioxide, and through the photosynthesis, it's releasing oxygen. So these terrestrial ecosystem animals or the organism is surviving in terrestrial ecosystem, having the oxygen cycle, oxygen supply. Think about the marine ecosystem. Mean it's fully occupied with water. How the oxygen supply is happen? So here the thing is, algae supply much of the world oxygen. So and intake in a huge amount of atmospheric carbon dioxide. So the algae take the role to absorb the atmospheric carbon dioxide and releasing the oxygen to the marine ecosystem. Right? So compare how the terrestrial ecosystem getting oxygen, how the marine ecosystem getting oxygen, right? So what about the evaporation of marine ecosystem? Any idea? Because the marine ecosystem is always occupied with water. So the evaporation is a part of the water cycle. We have discussed the water cycle, no?
Yes.
Yeah. So, think the word evaporation. So, if the word evaporation means it's related with water. So, marine ecosystem fully occupied with water. So, this evaporation water will come as the rainwater for the terrestrial ecosystem, isn't it? That is the water cycle. No, these are the things interconnected with land and water. Right, first we will discuss the three major things: ocean, coral reef, estuaries. We are going to discuss. First thing is ocean. Right, the largest of all the ecosystems. The oceans are very large bodies of water that dominate the Earth's surface, isn't it? That ocean is the dominate area of the Earth's surface. And the ocean also has some other regions, that zones, as we discussed in the freshwater ecosystem. Can you say that lentic ecosystem zones? How many zones we have discussed in lentic ecosystem?
3 zone.
3 zones. Can you list out that?
Littoral, limnatic, profound.
Profundal. Good. Right, like that, like ponds and lakes, the ocean also has the regions, but are those separated into separate zones. Those are those are categorized into 4 zones. Some of the scientists categorize into 5 zones and other things. Right, we will discuss as it's as a 4 zones. Right, so intertidal zone, pelagic zone, benthic zone, abyssal zone. So all 4 zones have a great diversity of species. We'll see one by one, right? So see the picture, right? So this is this area, right? Intertidal zone, because this the tidal zone, right? The tidal area. So this is intertidal zone. See this area, benthic zone, right? So this area, abyssal zone, right? So These are the zones of ocean. We will see one by one. Intertidal zone. So the intertidal zone is where the ocean meets the land. So it's the point where the ocean and the shoreline is connected. So sometimes it is submerged and at other times it's exposed. So when it's submerged, when it's exposed, think when it's submerged and when it's exposed. Because of the tide waves move, it will come and go, that it will go out and it will come inside the ocean, isn't it? The tide moving, is that water always be as the normal or moving? It's not moving, but the waves are comes in and out. This is the nature of the ocean tidal area, no? So in that time it's submerged, or sometimes when the tide comes it's submerged. When the tide go out, that time it will expose, right? So because of this, the communities are constantly changing. Why? See this sentence. Because of this, that mean the waves and tides come in and out. The communities mean that flora and fauna present in that intertidal zone are constantly changing. Understood why the word is constantly changing? It's not permanent one, isn't it? That waves and tides movement is not permanent. Always moving, that mean come in and out. So that area can't have constant community. Understood? Please respond.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. So, for example, if it is rocky coastal area, so on a rocky coast, the zone is stratified vertically. So where only the highest tide reach, and there are only few species of algae and mollusks we can find. That means rocky area, rocky coast. Some other coastal area may be sandy coast, isn't it? Some other coastal area have some rocky coastal parts. If the rocky coastal part is there, that zone is stratified as vertically. So that means only their high tides will reach, isn't it? So the low tides or lower tides will not reach. So highest tides will reach that area. So because of that region, that there are the species survival is minimized. So the few species can survive in them, algae and some other mollusks, right? So at the bottom of the intertidal zone, which is only exposed during the lowest tide, many invertebrate fishes and seaweeds can be found, right? So if it is highest tide reaching area, we can find algae and mollusks, and also some other times, some other exceptions, the lower tides, if it is reached during the lower tides, the many invertebrates, fishes, and seaweeds can be found. But the thing, it's always constantly changing, right? And the intertidal zone on sandy shores is not as stratified as a rocky area, right? Because the rocky area is stratified, but sandy zone it's not stratified, right? So waves keeps mud and sands constantly moving. Because of the waves and tides, the muds and sands constantly moving. So that's very few algae and plants can establish themselves, because that it's not constant species we can found. Always the changing, right? So the fauna include worms, clams, predatory crustaceans, crabs, and shorebirds we can observe. So normally we can observe the crustaceans, predatory crustaceans in that so area, no? Normally in our childhood we are catching that predatory crustacean and crabs in the so area in a ocean, or when we go for beach. I think you all have those experience. Right. Next one is pelagic zone. Right. So the pelagic zone includes those waters further from the land, basically that open ocean. Right. So that mean include those water further from the land. Right. So basically it's open ocean. So can you imagine, connect with this pelagic zone and the lentic water cycles, sorry, lentic water body zone, which is open zone there, which is open zone there. Okay, check. The pelagic zone is generally cold, though it's hard to give a general temperature range, right? So because it's open zone, open ocean part, and the flora in the pelagic zone includes surface seaweeds, and that means surface seaweed means it will not submerge, it will flood, right? So the fauna include many species of fish and some mammals such as whales, dolphin, and many feeds on abundant plankton, right? So these are the examples of flora and fauna present in pelagic zone. And next one is bendic zone, right? So in the bendic zone is the area below the pelagic zone, right? So we already seen that image. Below the pelagic area, the bendic zone is occupied, but does not include very deepest parts of the ocean, because very deepest parts will come as a abyssal zone, right? So it's having a limit of, see, from 200 meter to 2000 meter is defined as bendic zone, right? Beyond the 2000 meter to 4000 meter, it's come as a abyssal zone, right? Okay, the bottom of the zone consists of sands, slit, or dead organisms of bendic zone. And here the temperature decreases as depth increase toward the abyssal zone. So temperature will decrease when depth is increased. So think when the temperature decreases, since the light cannot penetrate to the deeper water, right? So think about the food chain in the bendic zone, right? So flora are represented primarily by seaweed, while the fauna, since it is very nutrient rich, include all sort of bacteria, fungi, sponges, anemones, worms, sea stars, and fishes. So did you observe the difference between bendic organism and pelagic organism? Please think, when I'm explaining, think. See, here we talked about bacteria, fungi, worms, sea star, but see here we have discussed some species of fish, mammals, the whales, dolphin. Can you understand the difference between benthic zone animals and pelagic zone animals? And tell me why. If you are not responding, if you are not answering, then I will randomly pick a name and I will ask question. Huh? Then if the person is not answering, then I will take action. Hmm? Purni 002. Purni.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, tell me what do you understand with the differentiation between the organism that fauna present in bendic zone and pelagic zone?
The fauna present in pelagic zone can gain sunlight, but in benthic zone they can't get sunlight.
The sunlight ratio or sunlight ray that is reduced. So it those animals or those organisms which are present in benthic zone should survive without sunlight also. That's why it's designed, right? Okay. Next one, last zone is abyssal zone. So abyssal zone, it's a deep ocean, deep area of the ocean. It's known as abyssal zone. The water in this region is very cold, highly pressured, high in oxygen content, but low in nutrition content. Right? So very cold, high pressure, high oxygen, but low in nutrient content. Now think about the organisms can be present or can be survive in that ecosystem. Right? So in that zone, right? So the abyssal zone supports many species of invertebrates and some other fishes. Right? We know chemosynthetic bacteria. Do we studied chemosynthetic bacteria earlier?
Yes.
Where we studied, when we discussed the food chain food web, I told one word, hydrothermal vents. Now this is the areas that abyssal zone occupied with the hydrothermal vents. Right? The chemosynthetic bacteria thrives near these vents, that hydrothermal vents, because of the large amount of hydrogen sulfides and other minerals they emit in their hydrothermal vent. So these chemosynthetic bacteria are start of the food web as they eaten by invertebrates and eaten by the invertebrate and fishes. Right? So these chemosynthetic bacteria, it's go under the chemosynthetic process and some other minerals. So it's starting the food web or food chain in the abyssal zone. Right? So this all about the oceans layers or zones of the four zones of ocean and the examples and how they are occupied, how they are present, and the flora and fauna, the special characters of these each zones. Right. Next, we will move into next ecosystem, that part, coral reefs. So coral reefs are widely distributed in warm, shallow waters. Right? So they can be found as barriers along continents. Right? So it can be found as a barriers along continents. And naturally, the dominant organisms in coral reefs are corals. Right? Because of that, it's known as coral reefs. Corals are interesting since they consist of both algae and tissues of animal polyps. Right? Since the reef waters tend to be nutritionally poor, the coral obtain the nutrients through the algae via the photosynthesis and also by extending tentacles to obtain plankton from the water. Right? So how that photosynthesis is happening in the reef water? Through the algae, right? And besides the corals, the fauna include several species of microorganisms, invertebrate fishes, sea urchins, octopus, and sea stars. So these are the organisms in coral reefs. So this is the coral reef. Coral reef, coral polyps, and extending tentacles. These are the examples. Right. So, a question for you. Write the question. Huh? Question for coral reefs. Hmm. List out the threats to the coral reefs in Sri Lanka. List out the threats to the coral reefs present in Sri Lanka. Right. Last one is estuaries. So estuaries are areas where freshwater streams or rivers merged with the ocean. Right. So this area is mixing of water with such different salt concentration creates a very interesting and unique ecosystems. So when the freshwater streams and rivers merge with ocean, the sole concentration of water. So that will create. So here, microflora like algae, macroflora like seaweeds, mangrove grass, and mangrove is can be here, right? So estuaries are in crabs and screen visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Hmm. Yeah. Right. So see this image. See here that river is coming and end up in the ocean. This is ocean and see this river is coming and end up with the ocean. So this part that mouth part that green. So sorry for the inconvenience. I'm having that connection issues. Right. So now we have discussed about the estuaries and characteristics of that water of estuaries water and how they are forming and the examples of flora, fauna and flora present there and the structures, right? This is the estuary structure, how they are forming the mouth of an estuary. See, this is the estuaries areas, right? And in the estuaries, that we can find the mangrove trees that creating mangrove ecosystem separately. So the second question for you is briefly describe the characteristic of mangroves and their importance. Right? Briefly describe the characteristics of mangrove ecosystem and their importance. right? Have you noted that question? Two questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I will create a link in the LMS to submit these questions answers. So for first questions 1 page, second question 1 page. It's enough. Write in your own hand, right? You can take from that internet sources, that you can take notes from internet sources, but filter it, write it in your own language, that means own English, right? Change it, filter it, create as the own notes, and upload in the LMS. I will create separate assignment in the LMS, right? Now 8:46. Shall we start new chapter, or you have time to prepare for next lectures? Have you all had your breakfast? So next we want to start with terrestrial ecosystem. So now we completed the aquatic ecosystem. Next we want to start terrestrial ecosystem. Shall we start, or you need break? All of you had your breakfast, because you are going to have continuous lectures, but please be dedicated, right? So now you are in home, no, isn't it? You are in home, so don't think we can keep that phone on and we can keep the phone aside and we can do our works. Don't think like, because you will suffer during the exams if you are not in the lectures, online lectures, right? So please be genuine, please be dedicated. Tell your parents we have lectures, and don't go outside. That means you can allocate the time for your family also. But that online lectures is difficult. You can't understand without being in lectures, right? So sure, right? Think about yourself for your exams. If you have a lot of notes without you attending the lectures, you will be suffer. That's what I'm telling, right? Okay. Can you second question? Yeah, second question. Yeah, it's related mangroves. One person asked that briefly describe the characteristics of mangrove ecosystem and its importance. That means you have to talk about the characteristic. Then because where it's located, how it's creating, and the flora fauna present there, and any other special characteristics, that for example the trees present in mangroves, if they are having any special features, right? The features of those trees, how they are starting, how they are having the food chain or food web in mangrove ecosystem. So list out the things, these things you have to discuss. Understood? That location or how it's creating, that flora fauna, the special characteristic of that flora or fauna. For example, the trees present in mangroves having special characteristics, so those characteristics you have to tell. And some other specific, if the flora or fauna or mangrove ecosystem having special characters, list out the characters in 2-3 sentences. It's enough, huh? You don't need to write bulk sentences, right? Then finally you have to list out the importance of mangrove ecosystem. For example, we having the woods, firewoods, it's supplying some other materials, nutrition to that ecosystem. So, for example, those things. So, list out some other importance of the mangrove ecosystem. That's enough. Like that, coral question I have asked, threatens to the coral ecosystem in Sri Lanka. What are the threats coming? And if you have any solution for that, list out the solution also, right? So in this way, answer these questions. And I will create the link in the LMS, submit there. How long you need to write these questions? One day? Okay, today is Friday, no? I will create the link for submission on Monday. Is it okay?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. So we will wind up with this aquatic ecosystem, and we will freshly start with terrestrial ecosystem in next class. Thank you. Go and have your breakfast and go to the next lectures freshly.